Hello and welcome back to And Still We Rise. I'm your host, Christine Seidel, and today we have our senior therapist, Lauren Buice, here with us today. Yay!
Thank
She's
you.
back. We love our conversations with Lauren. She always brings a fresh perspective and interesting topics. So we love having her. So before we get started, are you okay with me doing an introduction?
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Joining us today is Lauren Buice, a senior clinical therapist and leadership partner at Rise Therapy Center. Lauren is a licensed professional counselor and national certified counselor who specializes in making the deep work of therapy accessible through the power of play. Whether she's working with elementary age children or navigating the complexities of the teen years, Lauren is known for her ability to integrate art activities and joy into clinical sessions to help children build lasting regulation skills. Beyond the therapy room, she serves as a psychometrist, providing vital assessments to help families advocate for their children's needs in school. Lauren is a passionate community educator who believes that when we understand the intersection of neurobiology and connection, we can transform the parent-child relationship. She's here today to help us bridge the gap between clinical theory and the living room floor. Welcome back, Lauren.
Great.
I love
Thank
that.
you.
Yes,
Thank you.
Oh, that is such a perfect explanation of Lauren's work. Like, she is phenomenal in working with children, and play is definitely a language that she speaks.
Yes.
So we're excited to have this conversation. So to begin, a lot of people, and if anybody watches our socials, they see that we do a lot of play here and that it is actually work. But can you tell us just a little bit around what is play in our world, in a child's world? What is play?
Wow. Okay. So play, I think going back to what you just said, like play is a language. Play is the first language really that kids develop, and play is this understood language between specifically what we're talking about today, between parents and kids. It is for the brain, this like miracle grow. It is the one route in which kids' brains grow and develop in this really amazing and complex way. So yes, we're talking about play, and therapy is what I get to do all the time, and I absolutely love it, and it's great. But play at home is really what we're going to talk about today. Play between children and parents, and talking about why that is so vital for attachment and bonding between parents and their kids.
Yeah. And, even if you don't have children, this is such a fascinating topic, because I don't think there's a single adult out there that has not watched a child go into their world of play and just literally get immersed into it. We have the privilege of working with younger kids and being with them and play in a regular way, but even just observing kids, what is that for them? I mean, to be able to go, I remember even when my children were a lot younger, being like, hey, it's time for dinner, and they were just lost in that space. So what is actually happening in play for children?
Good question. So for play for children, one is a sense of like immersion and letting go, right? You will come back to your kid and he's still playing with the same two toys like two hours later. And that's an element of play, is that like getting outside of yourself, getting outside of time, and it's exploration, like in a very rich inner world that actually then applies to the outer world in a really cool way. So, and of course there's also the chemicals, right, that come from play, especially play with others. We've got dopamine, which is the feel-good chemical when we get to do things that we really like. So we've got dopamine that our brains naturally crave. We've got oxytocin, so that's the bonding hormone. So when you're playing with your child, that oxytocin is being released. We've got mirror neurons that are firing. So just neurologically, a lot is happening in that child's brain when they are lost in that play space. And spoiler alert, parents actually play too. Adults actually play too.
And if they don't, they need to.
Exactly. But it's funny, disclosure, I don't have kids myself yet, but I have parents all the time. They come to me and they're like, Miss Lauren, how did you bond with my kids so quickly? Like, there's a difference between just regular, what people just assume is play, and then the deep richness of child-led play, again, which is something that we're going to kind of talk about and explore.
Yeah, and I think that, understanding the neurobiology of all the hormones and, everything that's kind of emitted during play, and to know that that is actually something that we have access to internally, that we knew to do as children. Of course, we didn't know that's what we were doing as children, but to know that that was like a way for us as individuals to go into a space, and we kind of say that's where we work our stuff out as kids. We're kind of really making sense of the world. We're learning, and through that, we're getting like the dopamine and the oxytocin. That's all something that's actually intrinsically available to us at that time. And as we grow and develop, as adults, we're like, I forgot how to play, right? But it is important that we come into that space, especially, if we have or work with children, to understand why that adult child-led play is important. So can you tell us a little bit more about what is that and why is that important?
Yes. Okay. So adult child-led play is different than just, oh, I'm going to go outside and maybe play kickball with my kid. When we're talking about child-led play, we really truly mean the child is leading. You are not offering like, hey, you just called that's not how we play kickball. Hey, there's rules, or hey, that's not a fork, that's a spoon. Not offering that correction, not offering even necessarily suggestion, letting them lead and take this where they want to go is what we're talking about. And I think that's the difference that a lot of parents miss, because when we think of play, we think of board games, which are great. We think of, oh, I want to play in the dollhouse, but then the parent, maybe in a cute way, gets too wrapped up in what they want to do,
or what the family should be doing.
Like, oh, and I want to be the pink Barbie, And while there's some space for that, like negotiation and stuff, when we're talking about child-led therapy, they don't get that really in any spaces in society, for a chance for a kid to really have full autonomy within boundaries, within safety, right? But full autonomy over what an adult says and does and how they engage with them is really this unique space that often only happens in the parent-child relationship. And what that signals to the kid is safety, right? We as humans, adult or kids, we cannot play if we are dysregulated or if we don't feel safe. So what happens when a child and an adult play together is it signals to the kid, I am safe. And that is the only time when learning can happen. A kid cannot.
It's so true.
A kid cannot learn when, quite frankly, they cannot learn if you are just lecturing them and they are really upset. They cannot learn if they are distracted and not in connection with you. So a space like this, that's honestly like kind of sacred, right? Where it is child and parent on the same wavelength, giving child power and telling the child you are safe, is when they're actually going to be receptive to lessons. And I'm not talking about, again, a lecture, but just natural lessons that come through play, like reciprocity, perspective taking, understanding how other people's feelings work. Like that's when kids learn.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. I always said, being a former educator and then coming into this field and working with kids, like there's only one learning disability within like the mental health landscape, and that's anxiety. If somebody is having a panic attack and they're extreme anxiety, they're not going to be able to process information. Everything else can be a learning difference or a challenge, but like disability where you cannot actually learn is when you don't feel safe.
Wow.
And play is a beautiful place for adults that are in children's world to be able to give them a sense of safety and of authority. There's, children have zero authority in their life when we look at their day and like their schedules and their preferences. It's like there isn't any. It's just kind of like, this is what you're going to do because you're a kid, So play is a beautiful place for them to come into safety with another adult, but also have authority, and I think a lot of parents or people who work with children are kind of like, oh, I play with them. Like we play, I play soccer, we play board games, and yes. And oftentimes those are with other kids or other family members and stuff like that. And we don't really get to go into a child-led space when we're playing these games as a family. So why is it important to create that very specific time for one-on-one play with your children.
Yeah. Okay. So besides the obvious, like it's fun, it's your child.
Yeah.
Right. The bonding that happens. So that I think it goes back to a little bit of what you were saying with like authority, and maybe this is why parents sometimes have trouble entering that world. I'll go back to you about that in a second.
Yeah.
But giving them a safe space to explore autonomy is actually going to help them with, like I said, decision making, perspective taking, just that brain growth that they really need. And there's this quote, I'll have to look up who it's by, but it's like, kids don't want your power, they want their own. Right.
Yes.
And I think what happens is parents think that like if they get too enmeshed, or if they not enmeshed, engaged in a child's world, that they like somehow are giving away their authority.
Yeah.
But it's honestly like, it's not like you're pouring out of a bucket and your bucket's the authority and like all that. It's like lighting a candle, right? You don't lose the light that you already have, but you're allowing your kid to explore that. And quite frankly, kids need a space where they can control something and it go horribly wrong. Right? Because they're not going to be able to be good at controlling whatever it is that they want to do, what they want to play with. So like clumsy control and the opportunity to fail and have authority and not go well, again, in that safe space is actually going to help them overcome things later in life, right? Where they can learn, hey, failure is okay.
Yeah. So what about the parent who is like, yeah, that sounds great in theory, I would love to play with my kid, but like I can't play with them all the time.
No, you can't play with them all the time. No, that's just
not a would you actually want to.
No, I got a 50-minute window, and that's already more play maybe than a lot of parents are getting with their kids, even in a week. So wait, what was the question?
Oh yeah, I was saying, what about like parents who are saying, listen, I can't play with my kids all the time.
Yes, you cannot play with your kids all the time, and that's okay. And actually, for a kid to see that, like, hey, there are times where adults need to be adults so that kids can be kids. That's really appropriate. And you cannot be your child's sole playmate. You cannot be your child's sole source of entertainment. That is okay.
Correct. Yeah.
But you prioritizing like intentional time where it is like child-led, you guys are having fun, rolling on the ground, laughing, allows for honestly the rest of your days or weeks to go by smoother. Have a little less struggle with like transitions and stuff.
Yeah, and I think that's an important note, is like, this isn't saying like you should always be available to play with your kids. It's saying, hey, listen, take 30 minutes out of your week to be like, hey buddy, like this is our time to play. Like it's your choice. I get to enter your world. What do you want to play? It's important that we let our kids, be kids too, which is part of that, is being bored and having to kind of entertain yourself. But this is where a lot of parents are like, hey, if you get all your checks, we'll go get ice cream or this, that, and the other, rather than doing something like that, create space to just be like, hey, regardless of how our week is, Tuesday evenings is our playtime, and you get to pick what we do.
I love that, because really what this is teaching kids is that your bond, your relationship with your kid is bigger than the whoopsies. It's bigger than the consequences. It's bigger than any disruptions that you have to that relationship. So setting time aside, that no matter what, you still have that connection time, is going to tell your kid that consequences and disconnection is temporary.
It is. Yeah. And I think that's a really great point, is like a lot of times parents and adults in general, teachers, therapists, when we work with a lot of kids, we do get stuck in the rules. Like, this is what they need to know. These are the rules they have to follow. What am I, they can't go into adulthood being a turd, right? So like, I have to teach them these rules. But fundamentally, we also have to recognize that the relationship is really what's more important. We do have rules, but the more we foster this relationship, the easier it is for those children to navigate the rules of the world, right? And our relationship is protected from those temporary corrections, because it's going to happen, right? Like, even as adults, we're still learning. Like, we don't get this right all the time. So I think it is important to like prioritize the relationship so that, it can navigate corrections and whatnot. So, which kind of brings me to a point where, how do you address when a child maybe is in play with a parent and he is kind of being a little like, and a parent does feel like there needs to be some level of like boundaries or corrections or restructuring of the agreement to come to play.
Okay. Well, part of this is, you got to look at developmentally where the kid is at, right? That might be super appropriate and expected for 3 through 5, right?
Yeah.
If a kid is 10 and you're like, oh, you are being a little bit of a turd right now,
Yeah.
like somebody needs to give you that feedback.
Right.
That might be a little different than the 3-year-old that we would expect that from.
Yeah.
So one thing I would encourage parents to do is really watch your language, right? Instead of like, hey, you are mean, or like, hey, you are selfish, like watch that labeling, because what we can say is, oh, that didn't make me feel very good. Like, oh, I felt really hurt when you said that or did that.
Yeah.
You're not labeling the child as mean, selfish, a turd, like whatever it is. You are making sure that you acknowledge what that behavior was and maybe its impact on you. And there is space for that, but ideally you're going to have times where you're just focused on the child-led play, and you can have times where, hey, this is play, but I can also say, hey, are we playing by your rules or the rules of actual Candyland?
Yeah.
Right? And make that distinction and make the child put the connection of, oh, this isn't how other people play it. And that's okay. But even the parent saying, hey, I will allow you to play it this way.
Right.
But I want you to, I need you to acknowledge that, like, not everyone wants to play that way all the time.
Yeah. And I think that's really important. Like, can you do the correction, so to speak, in the play? Like, owie bowie, I just, you just jumped right over me and pushed me off my marker, even though we both landed on it. I can handle it. Handle it. I'm wondering, what one of your friends might have said if that happened.
Not having a giant race.
Yes, which some parents
do. Right. Hey, I have been known to really get into a game of Candyland, and I will get frustrated.
Yes, I will sometimes have to check a client on Uno. I'll be like, landman.
But isn't that a great example of modeling?
Yes.
Right. Isn't that a great chance for you as a parent to say, hey, if my kid were in this situation with a friend, how would I want them to respond? Typically, you're not going to want your kid to like knock over the board and say, you're cheating, that's not okay. You're going to want them to have more of a measured response and point out, hey, I didn't like this, like this isn't okay, but still in that, even a sing-songy voice to reassure that, like, hey, we are still okay.
Yeah. And I think that that's also something that, if we do have to make corrections in play, like we let those corrections be temporary, and or we set up our agreements at the beginning, like, hey, I'm excited to play. And again, building safety, a child may not really feel necessarily safe to play with a parent or a new adult that's in their lives, that there is some testing that kind of goes on there. And so when we do have to kind of come up with agreements, like, I'm totally down for play, I can play and I can keep playing as long as we're, respectful, meaning hands are for helping, not for hurting, things like that, so setting some agreements up. And also if there is correction that does occur. So let's just say like a parent or an adult has to be like, okay, well, I think if we're going to use our hands for hitting, we're going to have to end our time together right now. When that happens, how do you come back from that? Because I know what a lot of adults are going to say. They're going to say, I would love to play with my kid, but my kid can be really mean, and adults will have a really hard time getting into a play space with a kid who's not feeling respectful, right? Is not regulated, right?
Yes.
So how do you come back from a play session where there had to be some boundaries held?
No, that's a good point. And honestly, some of this starts with like the parent, right? Like the parent doing some work and like, why does being disrespected or feeling disrespected, why is that such a trigger for me? Why does that immediately take me out of this enjoyment that I'm in with my kid? Is that how my kid meant it? 9 times out of 10, no. But even if they do, that's a part of that like testing ability. And I think coming back to repair, right? Like ending on the note of, hey, we're still connected, even though we had to agree that, like, because you threw the slime on the wall, that we were done playing with slime for today. Like making sure that the last kind of note is still like, hey, we can try again tomorrow, or hey, what's something else that we can do that doesn't involve slime because we've lost slime for today. Like ending on that good note. But really, parents is going to start with like, hey, what can you do in that moment for you to stay regulated? And I mean, you can take your deep breaths, you can do your grounding techniques and narrate it out loud, and that kid's going to be watching you.
Yeah. And I that's an important thing to note, because I think adults fundamentally really struggle with play. Like I can't tell you how many adults I've talked to and like kind of coached through coming to a place with their children on, what does that bring up in them when we talk about play? Because a lot of adults are just on this overthinking addiction, need to do, need to figure out, need to fix, and they are so addicted to activation that they can't get to a place of groundedness to allow play to emerge. And it's a play can't be forced.
Right. Is that a need for control almost, or like a lack of safety within themselves, you think?
I honestly think it is to some extent a lack of safety when they are just being. Most adults don't like being. They like doing, right? So that does feel unsafe because it feels unfamiliar. And so parents will oftentimes, you can actually see them be tense coming to sit down and, what are we going to play? Okay, well, can I be, and they can't just be in that space of being invited into the world of play.
Wow.
And going back to kind of what we talked about, that play is intrinsically a way that we go within to access the dopamine and oxytocin. We knew how to do that as kids. As adults, we become externalized in our seeking of those, right? Something else, someone else, something to scroll, right? We've forgotten how to go back within, which is a form of being. It's not doing. So I think that's a big piece as to what makes adults super uncomfortable. But play can emerge in a lot of different ways. Even if we're not comfortable with figures, humor is a great way to start being playful with our children. So can you tell me a little bit about how can humor be used in the play space, and if corrections are needed?
Yeah, absolutely. Humor is a great way to bond with your kid. I mean, I don't think that anyone as adults can think of a time where they felt closer to somebody just when you're like belly laughing about something, and that's that like memory that is created.
Oh, I love
that is so joyful. But humor will say, like, with correction, I think a lot of parents, they're like, well, if I just make jokes all the time, my kid's not going to take me seriously. It's like, okay, sure, if we are making jokes to invalidate feelings or brush over the issue, if the real issue is actually being addressed, if we are giving a proper correction, if we're saying, hey, this wasn't okay, here's how we can do it again next time, but then we end off on like a, oh, well, that was, just like a funny kind of moment. Again, that comes back to teaching that kid, hey, we are okay. Like, our relationship is more than this momentary disconnection, this momentary correction. So it absolutely can be utilized. Again, as long as you're not just sweeping things under the rug or trying to make the kid feel some other way if they're feeling some kind of way.
Yeah, and I think that, like, when we do have to come back to a place of reflection or, connection after correction, like using humor to be like, listen, totally turdy move on it during the game, and I have those days too. Sometimes I'm a little stinky, and I have to somebody has to tell me that I'm being a little stinky that day, and that's okay, right? We all have moments where we are not feeling our best. It's just important that we come back and we remember that our relationship is important, and so using humor to soften a correction or that coming back to connection. And then also for adults, like if you're having a hard time getting into play, like doing something as simple as like talking in an English accent. What are we playing today, son?
Just Australian.
Well, all of my accents sound the same. So, finding ways to get your own nervous system a little more softened to be able to be in a play space with your kids is a really important thing, because ultimately, if we create space to be intentional and play with our children, what can we expect to have happen within that relationship, or for our children, honestly, even just for our children as they developmentally grow? What does us creating that space help them with?
Well, I think it helps with really everything that we've already talked about. We've got the brain development side, we've got that relationship side that is so important, like when we're talking about attachment and anxiety and stuff like that, like forming that concrete base for your relationship to stand on, I think is really what a lot of this comes back to, so that the kids don't develop anxious attachment styles, fear of abandonment, stuff like that. It can really strengthen that base. And then you've got like processing, right? Like that's where kids are processing, and when kids don't process because they don't have the verbal skills that we do, it's going to come out behaviorally. So really, you should see some reduction in if there's behaviors that aren't age appropriate. If there's externalizing behaviors, lots of anger, like play within a trusted adult will really allow for some internal processing to happen so that it's not coming out so visibly, so physically.
Yeah. And I think that, all of the things that it teaches developmentally to kids, and when an adult can join in their space, they learn that that adult is actually kind of enjoyable to be around. And as your children get older, that's something you fundamentally want your children to really integrate, is that, like, even though these are my parents, they're actually kind of nice to be around. I kind of enjoy being around them.
Well, and on the flip side of that, when a parent is taking true joy in their child, those mirror neurons are firing, right? So the child is seeing the adult have this reaction of joy and love. That's telling the kid intrinsically, like, you give me joy, you are good, you are fun. And so really a lot of identity building gets built within play as well.
Yeah. So all of that to say, there truly is some science and theory behind play therapy, right?
Yes.
Even though we get to play for a living, there actually is something that's going on there. So, well, anything else you feel like would be important to talk about in terms of play and attachment? Or
I think going back to what we were talking about with humor, right? The way that laughter lowers cortisol. It's also really good for transitions when you've got to, like, I don't know, get out of the house, right? Sometimes you can throw in a little bit of humor, and what it does is, like, it bypasses your defense system. Adults too, where it's like, hey, I bet you can't beat me to the door. I bet you can't beat me to put our shoes on. It kind of bypasses that defense system of, like, well, I don't want to put my shoes on, right? So that's also a really good way to incorporate play in transitions in little ways throughout your day. Play might not always look like 30 minutes carved out every single day. That might not be realistic for every family, but you can incorporate playful transitions and playful rituals in the morning, on your way to school, before bedtime, anything like that. But those transitions can really help.
Which is a big thing, especially for that ego development stage where everything feels like a demand and they're really seeking that, like, autonomy and agency. So you can do a lot more play just in, like, the everyday, expectations of getting shoes on or getting in the car or whatever, And so that might be a great first step for parents who are looking to try and be more in play with their children. And I bet they will find it's a lot more successful than the demand or the directive.
Yes.
At least we've definitely found, and theory proves it. So, well, thank you so much. Anything else you can think of you want to share with our listeners or viewers?
No, just go play. Whatever age you are. If you are a parent, if you are not a parent, whoever you are, if you are a 7-year-old listening to this, don't know how you got on here.
Good for you.
But, like, play and watch how, like, kids are such experts in play. Get in touch with that inner child within yourself, and, like, let your inner child touch your child in, like, a really cool way. So just go out and play.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't take life so seriously.
No, for real. There's enough of that. Find some time for just the play. Absolutely. So, well, thank you so much for coming on today. We just love our conversations that we have with you. We're going to link one of her past conversations that actually, was a really totally different subject. Is actually about, different generational relationships, but kind of plays into to similar cues there.
Plays into it.
You like that? So we're going to link that to this video so you can watch that as well. And as always, we appreciate Lauren, her perspective, and the humor and fun that she brings to all of our conversations. So we appreciate you listening. Please like, subscribe, follow, comment. We would love to get ourselves boosted in the platform. So we appreciate all of your attention to us. And we will see you guys next time. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.